Thank you very much for being here for this conversation belonging to Incroci di Civiltà. It's the nth conversation today. I lost track of the number. And it's a great pleasure for me as a director of Incroci di Civiltà, and if I may say so, as a friend of Lena Herzog, to have Lena Herzog here for an introduction, let's call it so, yes, a short conversation, an introduction to her exhibition, Any War, Any Enemy. I would like to thank all the friends, and I will not name them because they know who they are and everybody knows who they are, but I would like to thank all the friends who made this possible. If I can say a word on two persons, if I can, I will thank Silvia and Giuseppe Beppe for creating the opportunity for this exhibition, for creating the opportunity to have Lena with us for the second time. And so I will start this conversation by asking you, this Any War, Any Enemy is part of a diptych. Is the second piece of a diptych, which will become a triptych, a trilogy. The first part you exhibited here, Last Whispers, 2 years ago. It was about the vanishing languages and the extinction of languages. And the extinction of languages is also part of the extinction of humanity. So it was a cri de coeur, a cry from the heart for those languages, but also for those people and for us all. The second part of your trilogy, Any War, Any Enemy, I think stresses the any. It means anyone. It's a representation which has a very, very strong impact on the viewer of the consequences of what you call, or what has been called, an omnicide, the killing of everyone, omni. So, what gave you the idea of doing this trilogy, or the second part of the diptych so far, and how you started thinking about this topic, which is apocalypse, but we talk about the apocalypse later on.
I'm fascinated by the fact that we are our own worst enemies, as well as by the fact that we have come to a point in the world where there seem to be almost abstracted from us systems that have become runaway trains, like cultural or linguistic extinction, like the creation of the kind of system that hurtles us towards a global war, any wars. And there seems to be sometimes no sense at all about them. And I think that particularly that it began with the First World War, where everyone was so utterly engrossed and enchanted with an idea of it. It seemed as if they all wanted it desperately. It wasn't even any particular formally announced things, territories, or whatever it was that they really kind of claimed. It was as if in us there is this drive. And so I wanted to create it at once a cosmic view of it, as well as personal, which is an incredibly interesting challenge. And since I'm not absolutely wedded to any trend in the world of art. If I want to make palm prints on a rock, I'll do that. If I want to use AI, I will do that. If I want to use virtual reality, I will do that. And if I want to use photogrammetry, virtual reality, and then, you know, whip back to 17th century technique of mezzotints, I'll do that. But philosophically, that was the biggest challenge. And it also is just something that plagues my mind. I think about this always. And I have a sort of a kind of an obsession. I try to solve the unsolvable. And I keep thinking, how can it be portrayed? How can it be done? As if magically thinking, I think that if I portray it, it can become a sort of a warding off of what seems to be inevitable. And so it was an instinct more than a calculation. Why did I do this? And the next instinct, which is as strong, which will be the third part of the trilogy or a triptych, provisional title, Reversal, or Ode to Joy. And that is will be, it is something that I'm already beginning to construct. An antithesis to the forces of extinction, or rather self-extinction.
I have further curiosity about, say, the development of the second project from sort of stemming from the first. I noticed there are some, no, I wouldn't call them images, there's some imagery rather than images that stems directly from Last Whispers in terms of nuances of black and white and also shades of grey. And also visually, the visual movement, this kind of dizzying perspective in which the viewer is seen. I was probably overwhelmed by watching the 360, whatever it is called. It's the immersive video that you showed with Last Whispers. I had the opportunity and the privilege to watch the not yet finished draft of Any War, Any Enemy. Probably I'm thinking of that, but also from, say, the still images, there is a sort of continuation or a development from Last Whispers to this one, or did the new project starts from scratch?
You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, there's one image that I literally, unashamedly recycle, and that's the image of an expanding universe. In Last Whispers, the very first image in the piece about extinction of languages is an expansion of the universe. Actually, this is something how I imagined it would be like to be a supernova, a dying star. So you see the clouds, the shreds of what used to be a world rushing away from you. And there's a bell. Boom. And because I imagine that a loss of a language or a culture is a loss of a world. So it seems like an appropriate, right image. I also wanted what they are called people who go into an Oculus to see the virtual reality playback, the 360 playback, visitors. I wanted a visitor to feel like their soul has expanded, because to house 7,000, now far fewer languages, you need room in your spirit, in your soul, for others. And at the end of Any War, Any Enemy, which is something we're going to be ready with at the end of the summer, the very end is that very same image, supernova. And that is, we become supernova, but not only culturally doing a number on ourselves, but also physically, because the same kind of forces of acceleration and confrontation and annihilation of anything that isn't us, they are at work not only culturally, but actually physically. in terms of war, and creating and perfecting ways of self-extinction.
Technically speaking, if I may switch to that topic or subtopic, can you tell us what you've done in terms of starting from very complex and very modern photographing of bodies all around the bodies and putting them together in sort of virtual statues and then physical ones, and then arriving at the end at this 17th century technique of the mezzotins, which you learned, no, you didn't learn, but you performed or you practiced here in Venice.
Yes. When Silvia Burini and Giuseppe Barberi, when they were exhibiting and curating Lost Whispers here 2 years ago, I didn't want to just exhibit. I wanted to work. So I ran around Venice together with Giulia Gelmi, with whom I photographed sculptures in Venice. And we photographed sculptures of ecstasy and sorrow. And I also traveled back to Bologna to see Nicola dell'Arca, because I began to think about any war, any enemy. Who do we lose in a flash in such a global war that I imagine? People that are near you, your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors. So I called my neighbors around and I said, Nigel, Lou, Natalia and Brian, would you like to be at the end of the world? And they said, absolutely. And so I came with my team, Jonathan Yumayuza, and we took thousands of pictures of them posed by me in series of mise-en-scènes and theatrical poses. These were imported into photogrammetry, which is sort of the cutting-edge technology in virtual reality production. And then I stylized them with, again, my team, Chris McLeod and Amanda Tosse, because I cannot code, I cannot program, but I know exactly how I wanted it to look. I knew exactly how the poses should have been, how the statues should have looked. And of course, the fact that they became statues was part of my interpretation of what I was seeing here in Venice. And also one night, Adriana Vianello invited Vanna and I to go on a gondola ride, and we agreed. I never thought I would ever take a gondola because it's such a predictable, expected thing. It was the most magnificent night. And we dropped by something that Adriana said is her favorite place in Venice, and that was Bodega Tintoretto, with Roberto Mazzetto and Elena, who were working with mezzotint technique, not only other techniques of engravings. And here all of a sudden I felt, oh, this is right. This feels so right. The kind of blacks, the kind of texture of it. And also it was such a desire that I had to have something very palpable, a copper plate. So the screenshots that I made of the statues in virtual reality engine, then I worked with Roberto Mazzetto together on creating these copper plates and then creating the prints from them. And last September, for 2 weeks, we worked on creating the mezzotints that are now next door.
You told me that as soon as you entered the laboratory, you had a kind of déjà vu or déjà...
Yes, it was a smell
the
also.
Smell of...
Because I'm a printer myself, I print in the darkroom. And so these kind of, the smell of ink and prints, and also a place where, you know, things are made with hands.
Déjà vu with the darkroom is not appropriate to say, but so to say.
No, it is kind of like
Yeah.
that, because a copper plate is sort of like a negative.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's right, of course.
And the print is a positive.
Is a positive. putting all this technical and different technical perspective into view, because then you put them together in a way. You know, it's a kind of a story leading to the mezzotins and the murals that we can see in the next room there. Creates a sort of a story, doesn't it? I mean, you have a story behind the creation of this exhibition. Did you have it in mind? Is it serendipity or?
I wanted to, how do you depict an end of the world? And by the way, I don't mean to sound competitive, but my piece, actually the one piece I know about the end of the world, mine is truly apocalyptic. Nobody makes it. Spoiler alert. Because mostly apocalyptic films or works that call themselves apocalyptic are not. They are either survivalist or revenge pieces. So how did I create the story? When you create a virtual reality, you're not really creating a story. You're creating experiences, a feeling. But there are certain specific ideas behind it. So on the one hand, something you do not see here, but there's a very persistent, important image of birds in the piece that is the virtual reality piece that coalesce as if a flock of birds in murmuration. They represent the forces that hurtle us towards war. Not in a conspiracy or design, but somehow, as if in a murmuration, they fall in sync. Industrialization of war, financialization of war, mythologizing of war. It all seems to enhance each other and accelerate and accelerate. And in fact, work against the most rational and the most basic sense and feeling of self-preservation. So there come the birds. The second one is air, ash. Everybody turns to ash, which is what we know from Hiroshima. We know the reports. And the first thing that you see that is that dissolves into air, into ash, and vanishes is love. So you see the figure of lovers. And then I wanted them to float away, like in Dante, up, away. Second, fire. So also we know that there will be conflagrations of continental proportions. So it's the last fire. And again, you see people, and there's one figure there of Pontius Pilate, my friend Nigel, which is part of the mezzotins. And when I placed him in sort of a Pontius Pilate-like pose, and I told him, I said, you're somehow a figure of power at the moment of self-realization. And of course, what is the moment of self-realization? Flash. There's no way back. There's no way to regret, recant, redo. It's over. But there's that moment of self-realization, right? And then the third is the last flood.
I'm showing the pictures, for those who can see them, from the wonderful book which has been made by Schira, by Giuseppe Barbieri and Silvia Borini. This is it.
Yeah.
It contains, in the last part, the mezzotins and the murals.
Right. And so, so that's sort of the story. And then I wanted to show the kind of the wave, the human wave of humanity. And first I thought it would be just the human wave, but then it became this kind of a spiral, a tunnel. And that is the last thing before you see the sort of the end, and we become a supernova. And so, is it a story? It's not exactly a story, but there are certain specific ideas behind it. What it is really an experience, sort of trying to create a world and a feeling of what it's like, and to mesmerize, actually.
I have a question about the religiosity of all this, but for a non. For the time being, about the apocalypse, you were mentioning the apocalypse, and you were mentioning the fact that most apocalyptic films that we can watch today are not exactly apocalyptic. They're about revenge, about distinction, about it's the apocalypse for you but not for me. There is always somebody who survives, a beautiful actor and a beautiful actress surviving. And
there's always Tom Cruise making it out.
Yes, there's always Tom Cruise.
Yes.
So beware of Tom Cruise.
Yes.
You told me some kind of retrospective story about yourself when you were studying, and you were at Stanford, if I remember correctly, about what you actually learned on John's Apocalypse.
I was hired on an honorarium at Stanford University to review data. That was long ago. That was 37 years ago. To review data of 3 Rockefeller expeditions at the place called Har Megiddo, otherwise known to us as Armageddon, which was actually an actual physical place outside of Jerusalem. And the Rockefeller expeditions did this research of the destruction debris, and they found that it was plagued by conflagrations, by earthquake, because tectonically active faults were there. And it was also fought over and over. And at the time when the book of Revelations, the Bible was written, retroactive prophecies were all the rage, because historians were not sexy, but prophets were. Everybody wanted to be a prophet. So they would describe past events in future tense, something that happened already, but as if it will happen. But they had to become oblique so that they would feel like a prophet. It was a sort of almost a self-stylization. And so what happened when I was looking over the data, I said to my professor, Amos Nur, I said, Amos, this really looks like a interesting hypothesis that the book of John of Revelations was a retroactive prophecy, writing about the last war and earthquake mighty and so great, and that it's a retroactive prophecy. So we published the Biblical Archaeology Review, an article about it. It must have been 92, 93. And it turns out that evangelical Christians in the United States all subscribe to it, and they watch it like hawks. So after the piece was published, I came to the faculty. Margaret, Amos's secretary, said, "Don't pick up the phone." I said, "What do you mean, Margaret?" She said, "Just don't pick up the phone." And of course, the next time the phone rings, of course I pick it up. And I realized what Margaret meant by it. So they started to receive lots of hate calls, because it became something that people really didn't want to read, that apocalypse wasn't coming, which was essentially the driving thought behind the article, that hold on, this was a retroactive prophecy. It's not going to come. The end of the world is not near. And so the voice on the other side of the phone asked if I was part of the team who wrote it. I said, I was. And he then told me what terrible things should happen to me. I'm not going to repeat them. But what really blew me away was the last thing he said. He said, I want my Armageddon. I want now. And I looked at the phone as if, a leprechaun was going to jump out of it and run away or something, because it seemed like such an extraordinary thing to want. Why would you want self-annihilation? And I spoke about this with Amos, and Amos said, well, have you really read it? Well, and I said, sure, I read the Bible a few times, but and he said, well, read it again. It's really not what you think. It's not about the end of the world. And I read it, and I thought, oh my God, how it never struck me that it's really a revenge fantasy. Because if you really read it, it's not the end of the world for everyone. It's the end of the world for them. But you are on the right side of God. And by the way, I don't want to offend anyone who believes in God, but I have to say that that part of the Old Testament was a very controversial part at the time of, when it was apparently put together. Because it was not about love and forgiveness, because it was about revenge. And if you really listen right now to conversations around the world about things like nuclear war, you almost feel like there's a desire for it. And of course, do the people really desire their own death or death to their children? No. They just think that those other people over there are going to die. But they will make it like Tom Cruise with a pretty lady. And this is a very frightening thought, because I think it's this mythology, it really stems from this desire that I wonder if it's stronger than love.
Yeah, it's like Dr. Strangelove's going into the caves and deciding that he will survive and then he can walk.
That's right. I watched that film about 74, 78 times, something like that.
So your understanding of the apocalypse then is different, because basically you're saying that understanding or misunderstanding of an apocalypse is based on hatred, whereas your idea, that seems to me at least, of the apocalypse is that it interrupts love, because you have the figure of the two lovers embracing one another, and everything actually starts from there, and also the spiral of the spiraling of the bodies of the corpses, which become souls. I mean, they very easily can be understood in terms of souls spiraling towards God. So I find a kind of religiosity in it, which is probably deeper than the one you find in the book of Revelation.
I'm sure you're right, by the way. I'm sure that I believe. I don't believe in God, but I miss him. But sometimes I wonder, perhaps I do. Mm.
To some extent, both the exhibition and the 360. Sorry to ask every time. Back something. Back.
360 playback.
Playback. Yeah. The full immersion video to make it clear.
Let's call it the immersive piece.
The immersive piece.
Because you're essentially inside a frame. You're in it.
Are dark. Dark in the sense that the black is prevalent, but it also both of them become white, and so it is as if let there be light, in a way. Does it actually point to the third part of the triptych?
Yes.
Which is going to be called Ode to Joy,
or Reversal.
Or Reverse. Can you say some reversals? Can you say something more about this future project? What it will?
I prefer not to.
You prefer not to, okay.
Yeah.
But it's going to be more optimistic, at least.
It's going to be an antithesis to these two.
Okay.
And hopefully a balance. I mean, it will be, I'm actually struggling, and I tasked all my friends, including Sylvia, find me great art, not kitsch, great art about joy. It's very hard.
Does it mean we want to be unhappy?
I don't know what it is, but it
seems so. It seems so.
It's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, Vivaldi, definitely. There's a lot more of it in music, by the way. And I work with great musician, composer Marco Capalbo, who worked on both Last Whispers and Any War, Any Enemy, and will work on Ode to Joy. He already starting to write, to compose for that. And it is about the reverse, about the connection and love.
Which is already inside the first two parts
Yes.
of the triptych because of those embraces, and because even the faces are agonizing, you see humanity behind them. And so probably that will bring out the humanity that applies also to Last Whispers as well.
I don't remember who asked me about it. One of our friends said, why do you care about all these languages and about all these people? And the only thing that I can say is something really simplistic, because I love the idea of the variousness of our mind, of our soul. It really comes out of love. It's very embarrassing to admit, but it's the truth. It's as simple as that, and it is as complicated as that. And the same with Any War, Any Enemy. I really, really love this world. I would hate to see it go. And I deeply hate forces that are hurtling us towards self-extinction.
I guess there are many people who love this world and love this planet, etc., etc. But it seems to me that the nuclear threat is not on top of the agenda. People don't think about it. They think about climate change.
It's not fashionable anymore.
It's not. It used to be, probably in the 50s, in the 60s.
It was all the rage.
When we saw the mushrooms of nuclear bombs exploding in the Pacific Ocean or somewhere else. But nowadays, people don't think. I mean, I don't know how many youth know about, let's say, the doomsday clock. Probably they don't know it. It's there. I think the hand of the doomsday clock is as close as possible to zero, right. at present.
To midnight.
To midnight.
Yeah.
Yes. So, well, do you think is there anything we can do, to sort of reinstate?
I did my best. This is what I can do.
Can't see my exhibition. That's the answer.
But I also think that there is such a thing as fashion and fear. Like there's fashion in bell-bottom pants, and all of a sudden being worried about the bomb feels like very 60s, like wearing bell-bottom pants and sideburns. And the ironic thing about it is because we're not afraid of it, we're almost bound to have it. Because what is a nuclear war? It's not a war. A war is a battle, fought and then retreated, and the strategy. There's time involved. There are years involved. What is a nuclear war? That's pushing a button. How long does it take for that rocket or this rocket to land? A few minutes. And think about how completely unprepared we are for fundamental existential decisions about mankind existing or not. In minutes. How long did it take for Vatican to accept that the way they treated Galileo Galilei was wrong? 400 years. I think there's
plenty of time for mass destruction.
Yeah, 400 years. How about 4 minutes? And so John Hersey, who wrote one of the greatest works about nuclear war, Hiroshima, and it's a riveting, fascinating story how it was even published, because it was almost a clandestine operation by the New Yorker to have it published. They went to incredible lengths to have it published. What was the radical side about it? Because it wasn't a secret that there was a nuclear bomb. Time magazine published The Mushroom Cloud. The movie Oppenheimer, you see just the mushroom cloud. What was the radical side of John Hersey's Hiroshima? About people who experienced it, who were on the receiving end. And you're not supposed to do that with your enemy. You're not supposed to know that those people over there are humans. You're supposed to demonize them to the point where you feel fantastic about annihilating them. So what is it that held us back? Fear. Humanity that extends to the other side. Also clarity of sight, knowing what's what, where media, journalism, culture actually minded war and descended from the main narrative of power that wanted a war, for example.
Yeah, I'm afraid, from what I can see, maybe I'm wrong, but what I can see is that there is not a clear general conscience about, awareness about the fact that we may be extinguished in a matter of a few minutes, and we won't even realize it any time. Could be now.
That's
God
right.
forbid, but it could be now. At least in the past, maybe they were useless, but in the past there were mass demonstrations, against installation of missiles, etc.
Million people embarked in New York.
I don't see them nowadays. I mean, it would be very difficult to amass all those people on the streets to protest against the proliferation of, of weapons of mass destruction. And they do proliferate. All the treatises that were signed, they're gone. I think the quantity of nuclear bombs would be able to destroy this planet at least 100 times, maybe more than that.
100 times. And by the way, how do we know when this kind of force and all the military gaming suggests that once they start flying, everything starts flying? We may well become a supernova literally, because we're not just a rock. There's molten core underneath. There was a real concerted effort by power, particularly in the United States, to extinguish anti-war movement. And it was very intelligently done. Success. They have succeeded. And of course, it's not only that people will decide to have a nuclear exchange. How is it that we see the other side? And what if, for example, like before, ducks or geese fly over the radar and were they mistaken for rockets? Do we see them as geese? Or do we see them as rockets? Because my take is, we're going to see them as rockets. I actually have been collecting something very interesting. Close time calls. I have no time, this is 14 pages. But just a few. After Hiroshima, 1950, atom bomb dropped in the Quebec River by accident. 56, disappeared plane with nuclear capsules by accident. 56, a flock of swans over Turkey is considered to be Soviet rockets. By minutes, we avoided Armageddon. 57, bombs falling out of B-36, not exploding by some bizarre, weird coincidence. 58, radioactive runway fire in Morocco. It goes on at the end, goes on and on. Able Archer, geese over Turkey, geese over Kamchatka. Soviets thinking the Americans are attacking, Americans thinking Soviets are attacking, right? And by minutes, literally by minutes, this is when you start believing in divine intervention. So the few books that I read about it, by Eric Schlosser and by Jonathan Schell. Here's an interview with Eric Schlosser. While I was researching command and control, I obtained some newly classified documents through Freedom of Information Act. One of them, titled Accidents and Incidents Involving Nuclear Weapons, lists about 1,000 accidents. 1,000 accidents.
Yeah, it's a matter of probability. Sooner or later it will happen. It's simply probability.
When it happens, how do we interpret that? And in the environment of incredible mutual demonization of the other, how do we interpret that? Is it going to be satisfying to press that button and then receive a flashback right back? I don't know, is it really worth it? And because nuclear war is not a war, because it's all in our mind, we have to really take care of our mind. And we have to really take care of what kind of human beings are we.
So I don't want to end on a gloomy note. Is there a room for what you call out to joy, so for a reversal of this? I mean, this is of course needed. I mean, the awareness and acknowledgement of what we can do, or what they can do. It's tantamount to it. Where do we find room for this, reversal, for a node to joy in our mind first, and then in the world?
Well, Einstein was asked that very question, and I'm not going to try to compete with Einstein, but he said it is in the heart of mankind, because we have come to a point where it's really up to such basic notions, and it's very interesting philosophically, because what is an atom bomb? It deals with basic matter. And it is basic human matter, mind and soul, that has to deal with, are we going to, now that we have it at our hand, are we going to use it? This film Oppenheimer, which I did not like, because it mythologizes the creators, and there's nothing about what is it that is done, what it's wreaked upon humanity. Right, and also there was a trailer.
The creators of destruction. I mean,
the creators of
it's
destruction.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, this mythologizing of creators of destruction, and there was a trailer about it. And it's like, here was the creator of the atom bomb, and they thought they could blow up the world, and they still pushed the button. Really? You find that great? How about not pushing the button? And this is a fascinating moment, because all weapons that were ever invented have been used. There's never been a weapon that we invented that we didn't use. But this one, that's really up to, it puts us up against the wall of our own existence.
Yeah, it's the definitive moment.
It's the definitive moment.
Going through this threshold, the ultimate threshold.
And first we have to face that fact. And second, we have to see, do we have it in our heart and our mind to accept the other, to accept that this world is really big enough for us all.
How can we cleanse our mind? If you have an answer. I mean,
bit
this
by
is a big
bit,
question.
bit by bit.
Bit by bit.
Bit by bit.
But
it's work.
Probably the first step is that of changing that pseudo or mock apocalyptic attitude whereby apocalypse is in the end feasible, possible because somebody survives, etc., etc. I think that is the very first step to take.
That's right.
That's the wrong way of thinking.
We have to know that mutually assured destruction is assured. It is assured. So if we are stupid enough, if we are cruel enough, at least survival. At least rely on that. So
the moral of all this is discard hatredness and embrace love in a way. This is the old pacifist way of putting it. Sounds maybe 60s, but it is true. I mean,
it is true. And when all of a sudden peace in the world, peace on earth. Remember in Dr. Strangelove, peace on earth was the code. Peace on earth is all of a sudden delegated only to girls in a bikini in the Miss Universe context. There's something really, really wrong with culture. But I think that we are also told that we are terrible. This is all the Darwin world, this survival of the fittest. One eats another. Well, they should speak for themselves, really. I think we have so much good in us. Truly, I actually truly believe in people. And also we seem to have been so far lucky, fingers and toes crossed. But I think we have to look for possibilities in ourselves.
When you attend a funeral, it is sad to think that sooner or later those you love will do the same for you. And you may have thought it tragic, not to mention other adjectives, to think of all the weeping they will do. But don't you worry, no more ashes, no more sackcloth, and an armband made of black cloth will someday nevermore adorn a sleeve. For if the bomb that drops on you gets your friends and neighbors too, there'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know. Universal bereavement, an inspiring achievement. Yes, we all will go together when we go.